Good evening and welcome back to ParaGhoul Paranormal Discoveries from the Dark. In case you're new here, this radio show and podcast dives deep into the shadows of Saskatchewan's past to learn what lies within. Sometimes we even go to other locations, like tonight, across Canada to talk dark history, mysteries, urban legends, or even monsters. I'm your host, K.D. Kulpa, and I'm a horror author and paranormal researcher here in Regina, Saskatchewan. I love digging into the past to bring life to the ghosts and monsters hiding in the dark. And I especially love going live with you every week to tell you what I've uncovered. Tonight, we're traveling to Quebec this time. We're revisiting another segment of the Canadian legends and monsters. So turn off the lights, light a candle, and step back with me to the mid-1700s when a werewolf, or also known as the Loup Garou in French, was said to have arrived in Quebec. So this was an interesting monster and legend to look into. Not only was I able to find some scans of the original newspaper from the 1700s in Quebec, but I also found the link that took the legend back to France and kind of even some more, historical, like even further back than that, of the origins of the werewolf. And so the part about France was really interesting, as my great-grandfather was actually from northern France. So it was interesting to learn a little bit more about the area and about, that French history before they became settlers in Canada. Now, as far as I could tell, this particular Canadian monster, or more specifically the French Canadian monster, all stems from a newspaper article that was written in 1766, or at least that was the first account that I could find. So the article was in the Quebec Gazette on July 21st, 1766 to be exact, and I was pleasantly surprised to see that it was written in both English and French. So they have, one side was written in English, and then the translation in French was on the other side. So I didn't have to dust off my old, memories of reading and translating French, because it's been a long time since I've had to do that. So it was a nice surprise. And so this is the paragraph that I was able to find. And remember, this is a newspaper from the 1700s. So the way they wrote, the way they talk would be quite different from how we do nowadays. So just, bear with me here. Okay. By accounts from St. Roch, near Cape Morofka, we learned that there is a werewolf wandering about that neighborhood in the form of a beggar, which to the talent of persuading people to believe what he himself is ignorant of, and promising what he cannot perform, adds that of obtaining what he desires. It is said that this animal came from hence the 18th following, with a Dane to pursue his errand to Montreal. This beast is said to be as dangerous as that which appeared last year in the country of Gévaudan, wherefore it is recommended to the public to be as cautious of him as it would be of a ravenous wolf. Now, I should add here, I don't know if it actually is Morofka, Cape Morofka, because they obviously ran out of, certain letters sometimes. So sometimes if they're missing a letter, they would just add in another one, which made it really hard to figure out what this paragraph was saying originally. So that name might be wrong. I'm not sure. But anyway, the thought was that the Loup Garou creatures had come across the water to New France, as they were calling it back then, from Europe amongst the early settlers. So the townspeople were not too surprised that a werewolf had followed them on the boats and was now trying to attack their cities. So the story goes that they eventually set their dogs after the wolf, eventually thinking that it harmed, these dogs had actually bit it and harmed it enough that it was gone for good. However, this, quote unquote beast eventually did show itself again and came back even angrier and wreaking more havoc. Until suddenly the Quebec Gazette stopped reporting on the wolf. They never said if they defeated it, or if they ran it off, or even if they were curious, where it disappeared to. Apparently, they just stopped reporting on it entirely, which makes you wonder if they found out it was a joke, or that someone had been feeding them lies to get their stories into the very short, 4-page newspaper. Or perhaps they realized it was just a regular wolf and, not the werewolf that they had claimed, so they decided to just ignore it and move back to life as normal. If that's the case, I feel sorry for the poor person they deemed the beggar causing problems and, causing all these people to go after him, but at any rate. Now, if you go then searching into this supposed wolf attack in Gévaudan, which is a rural region in France, there is a big collection of different, stories and different claims about this unknown beast. And apparently it's commonly known. So this was actually something that happened over in France. So I guess this beast had killed over 100 people, which led to this story spreading across the world, which is why it ended up even coming to Quebec. Now, according to the History.com website, a beast was attacking men, women, and children between the years of 1764 and 1767 over in France. So this lines up, quite well with the supposed reports of one also being in Quebec in 1766. So you could tell that by this time probably there was a bit of a hysteria going on about, werewolves. So it's just interesting that it also came across to Quebec. And many assumed that this beast in France was a wolf, but of course others claimed otherwise. Some thought maybe it was multiple wolves. It's hard to say. But if you go by the actual accounts, and apparently they've actually found, I found images of documentation showing these fatal attacks. The first fatal attack was of a 14-year-old girl by the name of Jean Boulet, who had been tending a flock of, it was sheep or cattle. I saw different kind of variations of this, but, out herding anyway. So apparently there had been a couple of attacks prior to that, but this was the first one that was actually fatal. The other ones, the people were able to get away. So the claim was that the attack was by a wolf, yet not a wolf, was what was in quotations. And the attacks continued, like I said, over 3 years, leading to many women and children being found partially eaten, but it also would attack lone men. And apparently after so many fatalities to this beast, or multiple beasts, depending on what you might believe, or which, version of the story you read, the villagers decided to rise up against it and try to kill the beast themselves to stop these fatalities from happening and these attacks from happening. Eventually, it was said that a group of hunters had been able to find the beast in a field where it was just about to attack another herdsman. So I guess this group of hunters then chased it into the forest. Eventually, they were able to corner it and they shot it, but it was able to get up and run away before they could get to it. So the story claims that even King Louis XV had sent royal hunters after the beast eventually, and offering up to 6,000 livres bounty for the beast's head. So I tried to figure out what would this equate to in Canadian, but because livres is so old compared to Canadian dollars, it was hard to get a really clear answer. And it sounds like the francs is what replaced the livre. So if you then calculate the value of French francs to euros, then it might be approximately $900 or 900 euros, which seems like a lot for 1700s bounty. They must have really wanted this beast to be dealt with if that's actually what he was offering. Although when you look at other articles, the amount does vary. So in some it says actually it's only 600 livres. So that would be less than 100 euros. And another says that the person that finally did end up killing the beast was actually given 9,000 livres. So I don't know. It's somewhere in that range. They were offered lots of money to get rid of it. We'll just end with that statement. Okay. So the drawings of the Loup Garou from France almost look like more of a wild dog because it has a long tail that like touches the ground. And it was said to have formidable teeth and claws. The story also claims that it was the size of a cow, although they still haven't been able to determine what animal it might actually have been. Like some have claimed, oh, it might have been a prehistoric dog, or others have claimed it could have been a lion or even a hyena. And like I said, some also go on to say it was probably more like a group of large wolves or a group of wild dogs that were attacking people, because when you look at the documentation for the attacks, some of them line up really close in times, which makes you think, well, there had to be more than one, but nobody really knows for sure. What the reports do say was that the victims' throats and heads were targeted by the beast when it first attacks. So it, goes for the throat kind of thing. And eventually, in 1767, a local hunter by the name of Jean Chastel was given the title of the Beast Killer when he shot it while part of a larger hunting group. Now, supposedly he brought the body to be put on display in front of crowds at the Chateau des Besques of the Marquis d'Apcher. They attempted an examination of the beast, but couldn't determine an actual identification, instead simply going with the word wolf dog. So there you go, wolf dog. Now, even though they thought it could have been more than one, apparently after this, 1767 kill and all of that, the attacks did stop. So they figured that was the actual beast that was killing people and attacking people in France. So they put it on display to try and show it off. But I guess back then, so what they say is they would just stuff them full of straw. So you can only imagine the smell because that would not smell very good. So it probably didn't stay on display for very long. So so that was the assumption that this was in fact the beast that was causing the problems in the countryside of France, and that because it had been killed and stuffed, it was no longer an issue. And that's just kind of where it ended. But, when you head over to Wikipedia, the Loup Garou is also referred to of a few other things, which isn't surprising. Like most of these, older stories and legends, it has been also compared to the rougarou, which is a common legend in French Louisiana. So it's interesting to see all these kind of different variations on the werewolf. Or, sometimes it was simply just a shapeshifter, and how they kind of popped up wherever French settlers found themselves. And it's interesting, again, because it seems to adapt depending on where they settled. So for Canadians specifically, so in Quebec area, it is believed that they combined the legends of the Loup Garou from France with the indigenous legend of the Wendigo, which we actually spoke about in a previous episode. But where did the Loup Garou actually come from? So from the various articles that I could find, it seems to have stemmed from a French Catholic legend. So the story was started by Catholic clergy, is, what the claim goes. And it said that those that didn't follow the Catholic rules and customs, such as not celebrating Easter or Lent for too many years in a row, you could become a werewolf. Apparently, this legend goes beyond just the French Catholics, as there are other incidences where the church, back then would say that failing to confess sins or committing a sin could also turn you into a werewolf or into a shapeshifter of some kind. Apparently, even werepigs was a thing. And these weren't the kinds of werewolves that you would see in the movies nowadays. In this case, you might be turned into a wolf or a dog or a pig or whatever every night for 101 days unless somebody saved you. But why did the people of Quebec City feel that the Loup Garou or a werewolf was walking their streets around the time that the beast of Gévaudan was over. There have been many speculations by different historians and experts. It might have been that wolves had been seen and, it was just the ability of a newspaper writer to spin a tale so well that it would eventually lead to panic and hysteria. That's one of the common explanations that I found, especially when it comes to the Gévaudan beast, is that it was just a wolf, or it was a really large dog, and they just were able to spin it into hysteria to kind of create this more supernatural being attacking the town folk. Although the occurrence in France could have also just been a particularly bad year for a group of large wolves terrorizing the countryside. It's hard to say for sure, but it sounds like primarily the people that were attacked were ones that were, out with the herd by themselves. So it could have been just a bad group of wolves that was attacking people. I thought it was interesting to see that the Quebec Gazette writer had indicated that the werewolf was terrorizing the city was disguised as a beggar during the day. So, that it was actually a person during the day and a wolf at night, and that this person was promising things that he wouldn't actually fulfill in order to get what he wanted from those that tried to help him. So this really does kind of make me think of the relation to the Catholic explanation for how a werewolf comes to be, is that you have to be a sinner, you have to be, causing problems or doing bad things, and that would turn you into a werewolf. So I guess that is kind of where this writer was going with it as well, perhaps. It's hard to say, because again, it's from the 1760s, so who really knows what they were thinking back then, because I could barely even read the paragraph that they wrote, so it's hard to say for sure. But I thought this is a really interesting background into where the modern day werewolves might have actually originated from. I'm not sure where the creatures became connected to the full moon, as it seems, when it comes at least to the Catholic side of the story being told, turning into a wolf or a dog could happen any night, and it would happen every night until you were fixed. So it wouldn't just be a full moon occurrence. So that must be a more recent addition to the werewolf legend, I guess. Maybe it even actually came from Hollywood for all we know, because they did, a lot of some of our current modern day monsters come from the Hollywood back in the day when films were first starting, the black and white films. So maybe that is where it came from, who knows. But apparently there have been various forms of werewolf legends, which isn't surprising, for an extremely long time, because there's even stories from ancient Greece that speak of Zeus turning someone into a wolf after he sacrificed a child on an altar. So maybe that's even where the Catholic stories actually originated from, this whole idea of if you sin, you become a werewolf, and that is being a punishment for doing a wrong. If it's even in ancient Greece, maybe that's where they brought it from. Then in the 15th century, the curse of being a werewolf was also linked to actual witch hunts and witch trials. So you could be accused of being a werewolf and still be burned at the stake. I guess that was something they also used in Quebec and other places. So, it's another link to witch stuff, I guess. And just like the Wendigo legends that we talked about previously, some of the experts have attributed the increase in werewolf claims to be related to cannibalism and psychosis instead of an outbreak of large wolves causing chaos in an area. So something about, people coming to after trying to eat somebody, and that made them into a werewolf. Now, of course, this creature has become a favorite to many through, like I said, movies, TV shows, books, Hollywood. Dracula was able to turn into wolf in some stories, in others he was able to rule over the werewolves. And yet other more modern movies put the vampires and the werewolves against each other in war. I know that's one of my favorite spin-offs. So some follow the full moon myth, which I suppose makes the full moon time more mysterious and ominous, and it's kind of a fun, addition to a horror movie or a horror book, while others say they can change at any time, and instead you have to be, bitten, or you have to exchange blood, or there's a whole bunch of different variations on how you actually become one. But what's your favorite version of the werewolf story? Did you expect to find out that there was one originating here in Quebec in Canada? I thought that was kind of surprising that we had a werewolf in Canada, but I guess I shouldn't be too surprised because you just never know. But yeah, I don't know. Although I never fully understood the origins of the werewolves before, they are one of my favorite characters for quite some time. And I think it's more the shape-shifting. You know, the shape-shifting adds kind of a whole other interesting aspect to a horror character, that it's hard not to love the idea of creating a story about someone that can shift into, you know, an animal or a completely other person. What I didn't realize is that this legend of werewolves was tied so much into the history of even France, where my great-grandfather came from. So that was a really interesting twist to kind of fall down into tonight. Then, you know, add in the fact that this legend seems to change slightly depending on where the settlers moved from France, such as adding in some characteristics of the Wendigo here in Canada and the northern US to maybe, you know, adding in some things that are slightly different with the Loup Garou in French Louisiana. You know, giving these indigenous legends something a little bit extra to the original werewolf claim. It's absolutely fascinating in my opinion. But I don't know, what creature would you like me to dig into next? I've been finding the links between Canadian monsters and these urban legends and these larger, more historically significant legends really fascinating. So I'm looking forward to digging into the next one, whatever I decide it's going to be. I'm not sure yet. But I guess thank you for joining us tonight. Did you know I also have a weekly newsletter that includes a link to the latest episode of ParaGhoul Paranormal? Subscribers also receive updates about upcoming events like book signings when I'm going for my book readings and things, behind the scenes information, and subscriber only updates related to upcoming book releases, book signings, and more. If you're interested, head on over to my website at kdkulpa.com to sign up. If you'd like to support the show and the potential on-location adventures that we're starting to plan, you can find me on most social media platforms under KDKULPA. In fact, I also have some social media platforms now for ParaGhoul Paranormal, so you can find it right under ParaGhoul Paranormal and follow me along there as well, because then you'll see upcoming episodes and information, you know, some clips and things from past episodes as well. I also have a Patreon for those that want behind the scenes information, extra content, and a chance to join a live session with me each month. Now, next week, we're focusing on another local haunt. I've never done any research into the St. Louis ghost train before, but it seems that our guests tend to bring, you know, this particular location up quite frequently. So I think we better take that as a sign that it's time to dig into it. So make sure you join me next week, where we'll be talking about the history behind the St. Louis area and, you know, what exactly people believe that they're seeing when they see the lights coming down the tracks, and kind of what historical event even happened that would cause people to think that a ghostly train is coming down the tracks near St. Louis at night. I would love to try and get some more people's different takes on it. I know that they've also done some research on it with the university. Some university students tried to research it to see if they could explain whatever it is that's happening when you see the light coming. So I will try to dig into kind of all the different aspects of that so that we can have some fun with the episode. So make sure you stay tuned for our upcoming episodes, where we'll uncover more secrets, unravel more mysteries, and delve deeper into the shadows. Until then, remember to keep your flashlight handy and digital recorders ready. This is Katie Kulpa, signing off. Until next time, my ghouls.